Okay.
Cool.
There we go.
Jordan,
Do you just
I was
start?
It's up to you, Jordan. You want to give her an intro?
Sure.
You know her a little better than I do, so.
Yeah.
Your mom.
So my mom, yeah, this is Julie, also my mom. She's one of our board members for Fifth Element Free Church. She works as a nurse practitioner, but her true passion is actually loving on animals and God's creatures. So that's going to be the topic of her sermon today. And I'm really excited for what's going to come through. So she's going to do some education. We'll have some discussion, and then we will wrap it up with a guided meditation, which I'm excited for.
Perfect. Thank you, Jordan. All right. Thank you for that introduction, because it's always really hard to outline what you're doing and why. But as Jordan said, my mission is to help others through this connection to nature and through this connection to animals, to help others connect to the nature around them, and then most importantly connect to our Creator. I feel like they go hand in hand. There is no way you can be connected to all this nature and not really feel closer to our Creator. So it is a favorite topic of mine. So this will be kind of, like Jordan said, a few pitfalls I think that we can get into about caring for animals, and maybe just education about what some ways we can do that differently. But I don't really want it to be a lecture, so I'm just going to skip over a lot of it and just give you the overview. But if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those. And I do think that we have a responsibility to care for God's creatures, but even more than that, it is actually our privilege to care for God's creatures. And when I say creatures, I'd say creation: plants, animals, rocks, water, the entirety of everything on this planet is all connected. And what we do matters, and also what happens in nature affects us. So that's why it's so important. The discussion today will be focused on our domestic pets, thinking dogs and cats, but whatever you have care of in your home qualifies as domestic pets. And I think it's super important for us to really focus on them, because the way things have come about over the last hundreds of years, these animals are the ones that are completely dependent on us for their food, their water, their environments, their health needs, and their love and emotional support. So they have few resources to care for themselves because of the situations that we keep them in. And I also want to point out that I think that providing care to somebody like that is so vulnerable improves our life quality too. It just really deepens that connection to all of these creatures. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is diet, and that's just a huge thing for every living thing. What you nourish them with, or what we nourish ourselves with. So it's interesting to think what pets ate historically before about maybe 50 years ago or 70 years ago. I seem to have lost the last 20 years. I always feel like it's 2000. So, but before that, they ate mostly what they could kill or hunt or find on the side of the road, plus table scraps or the neighbor's chickens or the mice in the barn. So they ate pretty much wild game and then table scraps. The commercial pet food industry came into play in about 1956 when I think it was a guy in France started making dried biscuits for dogs, and then that kind of led to the kibble that we feed our dogs and cats today, which, like our own human commercial food industry, is very tainted, very toxic, and not very nutritious. I can go into details on that, but again, that I feel like we can discuss those if people have specific questions. But it's just not very nutritious, but it is convenient. It's shelf stable. It's dogs eat it, cats eat it. They add things to it, to salt and sugar to make it palatable. So that is typically what we have all fed our pets, myself included, until a little more recently when I have learned that there are better ways and there are actually options. So, for in detail for diet, small changes matter. So, most people don't just toss their kibble in the trash and start cooking their cat's fish and their dog's steak, but you can certainly make small changes and just add some table scraps to their food. Get a good quality kibble, the best that you can. There are options for freeze dried food, freeze dried raw, and there's also fresh and frozen food that small batch companies make. You can usually get them online, and they'll send them to you frozen. But these are mostly meat products for dogs and cats. Also, you can just cook your own foods. It's a little intimidating at first because there are a lot of nutrients that, say, your cat gets when it eats a mouse that you're not going to put in your dog food or cook in your stove. So it's a little challenging, but certainly can be done, and is not worse for them than kibble. I think if you just give them a good variety of quality foods, you're going to hit all the boxes and do well for them. Another topic is fresh air and fresh water. Water is the life source for all of us, and no less important for our pets than it is for us. So good, clean, quality water is super important for them to stay healthy and happy and comfortable. It's at this point that I start thinking about all the disgusting things I see my dogs drink, and probably cats too. And they definitely have a different microbiome, so they can handle a lot of microbes that we would not be able to. And that's important to remember too, that pets are not little humans. They are completely different beings. So treat them as a dog and understand that they have different needs, or as a cat and they have different needs. So it's not as important that their water is sterile, for sure, but free from contaminants, from chemicals especially. They're very susceptible to fluoride and chloride and chlorinated water. You'll see dogs drink out of swimming pools, but none of that's good for them. They also love antifreeze because it apparently is very sugary, but that's terrible for animals. So just be mindful of what your dogs could potentially get into. And cats just are not as, they're a little pickier. So maybe they have a little more sense. I'm not sure. So making sure that they have fresh water available. A lot of times we'll see, somebody fills up a swimming pool in their backyard, and that's great for your pets to play in and everything. But over a week's time, it gets very contaminated and then starts fermenting. And so make sure they have fresh drinking water available, even if there is other liquid sources. And fresh air, that's an interesting one because we all have so much exposure to pollutants in the air. Here in Massachusetts recently, we had a lot of smoke contamination from the Canadian wildfires. I know I live rurally, but in big cities, you have a lot of exhaust pollution. And so as susceptible as people are to those things, pets are equally affected by it. And they are lower to the ground. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they may have a higher toxic load. They're lower to the ground. So people living in a city or in an apartment complex or a place where there are a lot of vehicles, that exhaust really just sits at ground level and kind of piles up. So small animals are breathing a lot of that. They also don't recognize noxious odors as being poisonous. As humans, if we smell something that is noxious, we can remove ourselves or make sure we get fresh air. And animals just don't recognize when things are not right. So it's up to us to make sure that they have the access to fresh air. Toxins is a huge topic. And again, we can talk specifics for anybody that has specific situations that their pets are in, but the air pollution I mentioned, lawn chemicals are a big thing, because they are so close to the ground, and our pets walk in the grass, they hunt in the grass, they roll around in the grass. And then they, especially cats, clean themselves and lick all of those off. They bring it back in the house and they take it to their bed with them. So they spend a lot of time having to deal with a lot of toxins in their environment. Also beds, dog beds, cat beds, climbing trees, carpets, all of those things have a really high chemical load. And that is typically where our pets spend most of their time. And then add to that medications, topical flea and tick preventatives. We put these collars on them, myself included. You don't want them to be covered in fleas and ticks. That's not good for them either. So we put these collars on them with pesticides. So they wear them around, like we expose them to a lot. And then just maintenance care, deworming, vaccinations. A lot of pets are on medications. So all of those things are accumulative over the pet's lifetime. So we just want to reduce that where we can. And so I think some of the places that we do have some control is the air quality we talked about a little bit, lawn chemicals, keeping if you have a yard where your pets are and it's a private yard, there are many ways to have a beautiful lawn without using commercially prepared herbicides and insecticides. Again, different specific topics, but that's a big one right there. Dog beds, blankets, and clothing. I would say, you can mitigate that to some degree by washing their blankets before you use them. But mostly that is hard to control. Your carpet is your carpet, and you're walking on it, they're walking on it, stuff like that. They do have good immune systems and they do have ways to detox. So it's not that we have to avoid everything, but avoiding things where we can. I think one place we really have some control is worming and vaccinations. You just don't overdo these things. If your pet has worms, then treat them for worms. But if they don't have worms, which is an easy test that your veterinarian can do with a fecal sample, not expensive. If they don't have worms, you don't need to give them the wormer. Same thing with vaccines. Vaccines I could talk forever on vaccines, honestly, but for pets, they're done and they are done and they are done, and people don't keep great records. You switch veterinarians, you don't have good records, and then somebody else requires a vaccination, so you just repeat it. And I would say at best you can avoid those situations, and be intentional. Vaccinate for what you feel is important. Don't vaccinate for what you feel is not important, and don't overdo it. Keep your records. There are some states even that allow you to check your dog's titers for certain vaccines. So if they've been vaccinated previously and they are still immune, then you don't have to repeat the vaccine. I'm thinking rabies here. A rabies vaccine is probably, they say, is probably a lifetime immunity for a pet because they live between 10 and 20 years for most breeds. And it's probably a lifetime immunity, but now they're saying they'll give it 3 years. So most states and cities will require proof of rabies vaccination every 3 years. Some are still requiring it every year, but certain states will let you just show them the proof that your pet is still immune. And again, rabies vaccine is one of the oldest vaccines, so at least it has some studies behind it, and it's not deadly. Let's put it that way. It has a low incidence of side effects and stuff. But that's just one example of a vaccine that is just done and done and done because people require it without really thinking about what it's doing to the pet. sorry about getting on. I can get on a tangent about that for sure, but that's one that I think we have a lot of control over, and it is just a matter of being educated and being diligent to protect your pet from those added chemicals. I think the most important thing, after saying all those ways that we are exposing our pets to toxins and doing things that maybe aren't great for them, the most important thing I think is just to be intentional. I think we can't do everything perfectly, and they don't need us to do everything perfectly. If they have a less than perfect diet, if you live in a townhouse and you walk them down the street every day, like, you're just be intentional with them. They can handle a lot, and those pets certainly have loving, happy relationships with their people. And not saying everybody has to live on a farm. So I just want to point out that all of those pitfalls can be accumulative, and then we can just mitigate some of those things by being intentional, providing as good of food and water and access to nature as possible. I kind of skipped over that part about just what do pets like to do. And cats like to hunt, and dogs like to play, and they all like to play. They like to be out in nature. So just providing some mental stimulation for them and letting them be the animal that God created them to be, it goes a long ways to a happy, healthy pet that does well. We talked about reducing toxin exposure and just realizing that it is all cumulative. So even the little things that you can do to reduce their exposure can be very helpful over a 10 or 20 year lifespan. Avoiding medications when you can. I touched on that with worming if you need to worm, not if you don't. There are a lot of ways to treat pets who are ill, pets who have an injury, without a lot of conventional medical intervention. And hear me on this. I used to be a veterinary technician, and I do think veterinarians are super important, just like I think doctors are super important. But always just ask a lot of questions and be very intentional about why you're doing the things that you're doing. And then the best thing we can do is to be intentional in our connection with our pets. Really, they just want love and affection, just like all of us. And they give that so readily, without ever even asking. You probably have pets that just come over for a pet, or they'll come over and nuzzle you or lick your hand, and they're just showing you that affection. And sometimes it's at that exact moment that you really needed it. But they also need that back from us. So just a kind word or a pat on the head or a belly scratch, with just a really intentional, loving thought behind it. I believe that they know that, they feel that just like we do. Petting them, I could go into some of the science of what that does for us as far as our blood pressure and our anxiety levels and all of that. They have done studies that show people who have animals are better equipped to reduce those things, those stressors in our life. And I think that goes both ways too. There are a lot of animals that have maybe been traumatized, or maybe have been abandoned or whatever. And when you show them kindness, even if it's not your animal, you show them kindness and you give them a pet and you have a loving thought attached to that, that helps them as well. And like I said at the very beginning, helping them affects us. That's just doing good feels good. It's really a win-win situation. Also just sitting with them and observing them in their environment. How do they interact with other pets that you have, or with other people in your household? Or at the dog park or the veterinarian, wherever you go with your animals, how do they interact? What is stressing them out? What makes them happy? And observing some of those things, and again, just mitigating that for them. If they are really stressful when you have, the family reunion at your house and all the 6-year-old cousins are crowding around them, that might be very stressful. So that kind of ties into how they respond when they're in stress, and they can be very fearful. Cats can bite and scratch or run away. Dogs certainly can bite, and that gets them in a lot of trouble. But if you have spent some time with your pet and can recognize some of those cues of I'm super uncomfortable, you can mitigate some of that too, which clearly goes without saying is good for also the 6-year-old crowding around them, because you don't want anybody to get hurt. But just avoiding that for your pet helps them a lot. Looking for ways that what makes them happy. Like, are they really happy? Some dogs love to play fetch. Some dogs want to play tug of war. Some cats love the little chirpy birdie things that run around. Just observing them and trying to help them find ways to enrich their lives. Some pets really just want to sit on the couch with you and watch TV. So just knowing your pet. And interestingly, what I have found is that however it works, but pets really morph into their owners or vice versa. So if you are a super active person, you're probably just going to choose a pet that wants to be super active, or maybe you develop that in them. I'm not sure. If you're a person who loves to just cuddle on the couch, then you typically end up with a cat that just sits on your chest and loves that too. So it's really interesting how we are drawn to each other that way. I think, kind of wrapping it up, as you do these things, what you find is more peace and love and enjoyment and deeper connection with your pet. Again, that helps us just feel better about what we're doing. It helps them be comfortable in their surroundings, a happy, healthy life, and it's a win-win situation for everything. A couple of other things I wanted to touch on, because I do have there are a lot of things to consider for wild animals. Like, there's such a big topic, but I think just being kind when you can. You can't save everything, and we're not expected to, but when God puts something in your path, then you probably should pay attention to it. And, if there is a turtle in the road, maybe you just pull over and move the turtle across to the other side and help him out. It takes a few minutes, that kind of thing, but you go on your day and you think that turtle might not have made it across the road had I not helped him. So being mindful of even the wild animals in our surroundings, slowing down for animals trying to navigate traffic. What a nightmare that would be for, a rabbit or a deer or a stray dog. So help when you can. And I think that is what's going to make the difference in this world. If everyone just was kind and lend a hand to nature when you can. Like I said before, doing good, I think, feels good and is necessary to foster these connections. That is kind of what I had for, why I think it's really important to connect with nature, because I just don't think you can connect with nature without connecting with our Creator and with God, however you see that. We cannot deny that we are all made from the same place, from the same entity, because it all just works together. And I think that was clearly the intention from the beginning, that the plants and the animals and the rocks and the water and the people all share this space in harmony. Does anybody really have any specific questions about, I wanted to not make this a lecture about dog food or medicines or healthcare, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I have a question. I was thinking about, so I have no pets now. I used to have pets, but now I have too many children, too many things to keep alive. I like can't wait for my kids to get a little bigger so that I feel comfortable getting a pet again, because I miss having pets around. I always have had cats. I had dogs when I was really young, but my parents took care of them, and for me, I had cats. I never let my cats be outdoor cats. And something that you said actually, and I noticed too, because when people talk about the lifespan of cats, my cats never lived as long as what I consider to be the average or like even typical lifespan. And I'm wondering now if that has something to do with it. If the fact that that I never let them go outside. And that it was, I mean, it's tough because it's like when I got my first cat, I was in college, I moved a lot. Right. So it's like I moved from like one apartment, then I moved, he followed me to 3 different states, actually, this cat. So like that was my concern. And I kind of knew that I was entering into that space of my life where I was going to be very kind of nomadic. And so I didn't think it made sense. Like, I guess I just didn't trust that he'd be okay, which is probably on me. So I don't know. Can you like speak to that at all? Because I'm just curious.
Yeah. And I think that's a tough one, because I do feel like cats love being outside. Every cat I've had has loved being outside, but it is a dangerous place out there for cats. And a lot of times they don't live a long time outside because of trauma or getting hit by a car or eaten by something else. So it can be a very dangerous world for cats, and they do pretty well indoors. Like, a lot of people keep cats indoors. But I do think the best case scenario is a scenario where they can have limited time outside in a safe environment. We have had cats. I just don't have a cat now, but this is the first time in a long time. And most all of them have been indoor outdoor cats. And I think it's good for them to be outdoors, is the short answer. But I spent a lot of times arranging things so that I was sure I could get my cat back inside at night, because that's when the predators are really out. But I've also always lived rurally. So traffic wasn't a big factor in that case. I have a friend that lives in the city, and she lets her cat out at night because that's when there's no traffic. So I think tailoring that to what works best for you and for your cat. I think a cat can be very happy indoors if there is a good amount of stimulation and toys or looking to the outside. The other thing I've been seeing more now that we have the internet, I see more of, is cats on leashes. And so cats can go exploring with their owners. And I recently had a cat that Elias, my grandson, found a couple of years ago, and Jordan gave to me. Thank you. But he was the most interesting creature ever. And once we moved to Massachusetts, we were taking walks and we discovered him in the woods one day. And he just started following us on our hikes. And then he was just hiking with us and with the dogs every time we would go out. But he was pretty much always in the house when we were home. So cats can be very adventurous. I never really got him used to being on a leash, which was my goal, because I wanted to be able to take him everywhere. And he hated the leash. So that didn't work. But here in our own neighborhood, in our own woods, he would go hiking with us, and then he would come inside. And that was a good, safe alternative for him.
That's funny, because I actually did try to get my cat on a leash. And every time I put a leash around his neck, he would death roll. Like he would literally just like, and I like, so I'd have to like drag him. Like it was terrible. So
that Elliot, oh my goodness. I had him on a harness, and he wouldn't death roll. He just wouldn't move. Only his tail would just slap the ground, and he gave me dirty looks. But yeah, I never could get him to get up and walk in it. But if I took it off of him and he's like, okay, let's go. So
funny, because the one place I lived when I was in law school, I was in Atlanta, and I lived in an apartment on the 3rd floor of a building, and I had like a little corner balcony, and I would let him out on that because he couldn't get anywhere. Like I was like, there's no, but there were times that I would see him hanging so far like out the rail because there'd be like a bird in a tree or something, and I'm like, oh my God, he's gonna jump. Like one of these days he's gonna jump. He never did, but I always felt like he loved it. He would sit out there all day long. But then I brought him to New York City, and I was like, yeah, no. Like, sorry, buddy. Like it's we're living in here now.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to make those choices for them because you know that they would not be able to survive outside. And then sometimes it's, that scenario where it's part way. Like they might survive outside. Maybe they will die younger, but they will have a great life if that's important to them, you know, being outside versus keeping them inside. I've had cats that I've tried to keep inside and they really just hated it so much. So I started letting them out and they did fine for sometimes a long time, but not always. I'm not going to lie. I've lost a few cats that way. So not good.
I think it's what kind of quality of life do you want them to have, and the cats themselves. Like some cats really want to be outside and some cats don't really care about it, and letting like knowing your cat, understanding what's going to give them the best quality of life rather than length of life. Because with all the toxins and stuff, Mom and I have both lost more and more frequently do we lose our pets to toxin overload than trauma.
Yeah, I would agree with
unfortunately. Like I feel like when 20 years ago we were losing animals to trauma and animals and cars, and now most of our pets are lost to liver failure or something toxin related.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how does that manifest? Is it like kidney failure, liver failure, that kind of cancer?
Yeah, there's a study done. They did like a 30-year study where they have the lifespan of a golden retriever. I think the studies were done on golden retrievers. Used to be about 17 or 18 years, and now it's about 9 to 12 years.
Crazy.
Yeah, and that's over. I think the study was like 30 years ago, or that was 1970, right? No, it was like 50 years ago.
Yeah, right. 1990 was 10 years ago, Julia.
Right. I don't know why this keeps happening to me, but the statistics now are 50%. 50% of dogs will have a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime, or that is what will end their life. That's an unbelievable number. So I agree that we not us on this call, but humans in general, their life expectancy for their pets is getting lower and lower due to the more and more convenience that we have, the medications. I see in the veterinary world, they're advertising doggy Prozac and stuff like that. We're just doing to them what we have led humans to. And again, I'm not saying any medication is appropriate or inappropriate. That's depending on the pet and between you and your vet. I'm just saying those kinds of things were never done in the natural world.
Weren't done to humans either.
Exactly.
Well, and then because you said the same thing about food, right? When you that's the first thought that I had too, was like they're doing the same thing to pet food that they do to our food. It's it's the exact same thing.
It is really exactly.
And did the medications that they give them, is it all petroleum based stuff like humans too?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had my uncle had a dog and they prescribed this dog like Xanax, basically. It was like Xanax. And I was like, are you serious?
It's rough. It's sickening.
Jess, can I say something?
Yes, please.
So I'm an energy healer, and I have a lot of clients, well, not a lot of clients, but I have a fair amount of clients coming to me who are animal owners, and I work with several dog breeders as well. And I had one woman come to me. She brings her dog in, and her dog was going off to their show dogs. And it was on a Thursday, it was Saturday, they were going to go out for this big show. And she said that her dog is acting strange and is all very anxious and upset. And I turned and I asked, how are you feeling? And she said, and she immediately made that connection. I very seldom treat the animals, I treat the owners.
Mhm.
because animals absorb all that that emotion. So when you speak about your uncle and his dog needing the Xanax, my first thought was, "How's your uncle?"
Yeah.
Because it's almost like
Yeah.
our animals are there to serve us, like they sacrificially
Mm.
take a lot of hits on our behalf.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a beautiful relationship, but when you're aware of that, that turns into gratitude and care then for the animal, because you realize what the animal does for
Mhm.
you. And Roundup is absolutely, I mean, you know, that's in all of our food, but
Right.
people also spray it on the grass, and that's where the animals go. And I can make up a remedy, which is the antidote for Roundup. So one woman was talking about how sick her dog became, vomiting and everything very suddenly for no reason they could find out. But her husband had been spraying the perimeter for weeds, just where the fence line was, so he didn't have to weed whack through them. And of course, dogs rush up to the fence line because they
Mhm.
always want to sniff what's on the other side. You know, they're unfamiliar. Did someone else go by? Did they leave a scent? Um, so, and that affects dogs. So even if a dog isn't outside where Roundup is being used, it's in their food and it's in our food. So, and that is such a marker for cancer as well. It doesn't surprise me at all that our animals and the human population have seen such an increase in that. It's toxicity is enormous, as well as the assault on our immune system.
Mhm.
So, you know, they say that when you look at someone like doing a post-mortem, that person may have been hit by a car, but they discover cancer inside. We have cancer regularly through our lives. The body, the immune system just takes care of it. It's not something that overwhelms us unless our immune system is compromised. And then, of course, what compromises our immune system is fear and anxiety and emotions that are not balanced. And the work that I do speaks so much on, you know, there's a chiropractic mandate that is structure governs function. Well, emotions govern structure that governs function. So our emotional state is very important. But yeah, our animals really take it for us.
A really good point. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, one of the things we can do is just not use Roundup. At least, you know, we can't maybe control it on all of our food source, but we can certainly not be spraying it in our yards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the basis for most kibble is a lot of times, a corn base, which if it's not organic, well, then it's got Roundup on it. And
Oh,
dogs don't eat
sure.
corn. Yeah, dogs don't eat
Yeah.
corn. Like that's not a natural food for them, but that is the basis, main ingredient for a lot of things. So yeah, their food supply is absolutely
Very contaminated.
Mhm.
I think that's an excellent segue into the meditation piece if you're ready. Speaking of gratitude and kindness for our pets.
Yes.